I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today, I'm excited to be here with Jerome Myers. Jerome is a developer. He's a founder and chief inspiration officer of two ventures. He has DreamCatchers as a boutique coaching firm, and it supports first and second generation wealth creators. Jerome, first of all, thanks for being on the show with me today. I really appreciate it.
Jason, grateful for the opportunity to share with you and your community today.
Love it. And so I would love it. Your bio is very extensive and interesting, but I really would rather hear it from your mouth and let you tell us your story.
Yeah, man. So my last job in corporate America was building a $20 million division for a Fortune 550. I was employee number 2 in that group on January 13th. And by the end of September, we had 175 people working on this big, hairy, audacious goal. And by the end of the year, we hit that $20 million mark, made about 30% profit margin. And I got a phone call on December 24th at 4:55, and it went something like this. Hey, Jerome, you and I have been battling. We've been going back and forth negotiating for the past few weeks. And I just want to let you know I've made a decision. Pause. We're going to lay about half of them off. And I said, no, that's not the right answer. We need to figure out another place to put these folks. And he said, no, we're going to lay them off. This really isn't a discussion. I'm informing you of a decision. And I tried to do what I could for the next few minutes. And then he said, look, man, it's 4:59 on Christmas Eve. I'm going to go spend the rest of the year with my family. And I'll talk to you next year. And then the 3 beeps that, if you've ever had a call drop, if you have an iPhone, that boop, 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 that's what I heard. And I stared at my phone, wondering if the call dropped, but I realized he hung up on me. And so I went to work. I wanted to make it as objective as possible. I know a lot of those decisions can be subjective, but I wanted to make it as objective as possible. So I started looking at efficiency and performance and just saying, who can we keep? Who can we make sure that we have a place for them? Because I didn't want to lay people off. It was my first time actually being in that position. And we put a plan together, put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and off to the races for another $20 million year. And my promise to myself at that point was, hey, they're making me do it. I am not going to ever do anything like this again. And so the following year, I'm standing up in front of the group a couple of days before Thanksgiving, and I said, hey, be really careful with how you spend your money when you get paid this week. I don't want you to go spend it all on Black Friday. I'm not sure what might happen. And it was in that moment that my stomach sank because I began to question what I was doing. Before I told myself, hey, they made me do this. Now I'm doing this of my own volition, and I was taking responsibility for it. And it was there that I realized, hey, we have a choice in every situation. We don't have to participate or do anything. It's our choice to do so. And so I decided that I was going to leave corporate America. And so not shortly thereafter, I guess I stayed till the end of the year, I dropped out and pursued real estate full time, which was a dream that I had on the shelf from sophomore year in college. And so as a sophomore engineering student, I realized that I didn't really want a job. I realized that there was this concept of passive income, and what I noticed was that the guy who owned our complex was doing about $700,000 a year in top line revenue, but we never saw him or talked to him. And so I was like, well, how do you do that? See, I'm the son of a soldier and a stay-at-home mom. So We didn't have people with multi-million dollar real estate portfolios coming to hang out at the house or do the barbecue or any of that stuff. And so I was totally disconnected from that group of people who were doing these types of deals. And when I left corporate America, I realized that I'd done nothing from the time that I was in college to the time that I left to change that. And the banks made it very clear that that was a necessary step in my journey. So when I went to the first bank and said, "Hey, don't you want to give me $1 million to buy this 23-unit apartment building?" They all told me no. And well, the first one told me no. I went to the second and the third, and then eventually I ended up in a space where I realized that nobody was going to lend me money. In fact, I went to 10 banks and they all told me the same thing. So I pivoted and did what everybody else does. I started fixing and flipping. And I'm sitting on the stoop of a $90,000 rehab, and a guy pulls up in a white Dodge Ram pickup, and he says, "Hey, bud, I'd like to check out your finishes. We're going to do a project down the street, and I want to make sure that we're going to put finishes in similar to what's going to market." So he walks in. He's like, "Ooh, you tucked the wall out, and look at that gooseneck sink in the island. And this granite is certainly not level one. This must be an upgraded situation here." We go upstairs. He's like, "Man, this tile in the bathroom is really nice." And he's coming back downstairs, getting ready to walk out the front door. He stops on the threshold and he says, "Do you know anything about that building behind the Chimbo Mart?" I said, "The Chimbo Mart? The apartment building, the 23 unit?" He said, "Yeah." I was like, "Man, absolutely. I tried to buy that 4 or 5 months ago." He said, "Well, I'm going to make an offer on it this afternoon." I said, "Really? I'd love to be a part of the deal." He said, "What are you going to bring to the table?" I said, I don't know. We'll figure that out. But you're the guy I've been looking for. The bank said I need an experienced partner. Love to do this deal with you." He said, "Well, what are you going to bring to the table?" I said, "Man, look, we'll figure it out. Just don't leave me out of the deal." And he looked down, shook his head, and furrowed his eyebrows, and then said, "What are you going to bring to the table?" I said, "Look, man, I don't know what you need, but we'll figure it out. Just don't leave me out the deal." And finally, he was frustrated with the negotiation and my lack of commitment. So he walked out the door, walked through the grass, hopped in his truck, drove off. And, in my mind, I'm like, "Man, I just sealed the deal. I got this guy who's going to be my partner." And it's a Wednesday. And I'm like, "Okay, so he submits the offer today. Tomorrow, Friday, I'll get a call and he'll say, 'Hey, we're going to get this thing done.'" Well, Friday came and went, nothing happened. I was like, "Oh, man. Well, maybe they needed to negotiate through the weekend." Monday rolled around, still nothing. Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm thinking to myself, what's going on? And then I realized I never got his phone number. He didn't have mine. It's like, oh man, well, maybe that's just it. Maybe he just didn't get in contact with me yet. He didn't know how to. Maybe he'll drive by. So if I just stay at the flip house a little bit longer, maybe he'll pop up. Next weekend comes and goes, still nothing. Then I get a phone call from a guy on the following Tuesday, and he says, "Hey, man, I got the opportunity to be a GC on this project, the one that you and I were talking about 5, 6 months ago." And I told them I was only comfortable doing it if you were a part of the deal. And I paused and I was like, "Man, okay, so when are we meeting?" And we ended up doing that deal. And the funny part was my name was in the paper. So the lenders who weren't willing to lend to me 6 months ago, 12 months ago, they were reaching out wanting to talk about my portfolio and my refinance plans and what I had in the pipeline. And it was a really interesting turn of events. So we cultivated a relationship with those folks. And I left Richmond, Virginia, came down to Greensboro, North Carolina, started buying here. And the deeper I got into the real estate space, the more I realized that there was something in corporate America that I missed. And that was the ability to, and the opportunity, not the ability, but the opportunity to develop and coach people who were growing in their careers. It was very much being a lone wolf, just executing and operating multifamily real estate deals. But what was that piece that was missing in the human interaction, helping people grow? And so in the bio, you said I'm a developer. I am. I'm a developer of people and places. And so I'll pause there because I feel like I've been rambling for a while.
No, no, I love it. That's the great. I love that's my favorite part about the doing the podcast is just hearing the stories and kind of how people got started. And I think, I mean, there's a lot of cool sort of takeaways there, and one is just that you realize corporate America wasn't for you and made that switch. And so you said you were sort of interested in real estate since as a sophomore. Like how did that happen? How did you become interested in real estate? What was the kind of inspiration behind that?
Yeah, so shortly before that conversation with my buddy Duran on the stoop about the guy making $700,000 a year, I had a summer job and I was working in a fitness center, and it was a Sunday. I worked from 1 to I was supposed to work from 1 to 5, and at 4:30 I'd been there and I hadn't seen anybody the entire time that I was there. So I closed up shop, went back to my dorm room, and about 5 minutes later, my supervisor came knocking on the door and he said, "Hey, why aren't you in the fitness center? People are trying to use it." And I said, "Man, they can't get a workout done in 10 or 15 minutes. Like, there was no reason for me to stay there. Nobody was going to actually be able to get any real work done." He said, "Well, I don't pay you to think, I pay you for your time. And next time you leave before the hours of operation are over, you won't have a job anymore." And I made a decision at that point, Jason, that I didn't want to sell my time for money. I
Yeah.
wanted to figure out how to decouple my time from money and be able to earn while I'm not actually in a physical place. And so the there's only a few ways that I think you can get that done, but the one thing that is consistent is a subscription model. And so there's, people pay for Netflix, they pay for their phone bill, people pay rent at apartment buildings. And so for me, I wanted to do something that was kind of higher ticket, but because there was more opportunity for profit in those types of products. And I wanted something that was, I guess, recession resistant, right? And so for me, the real estate was something that made a ton of sense and it checked both of those boxes.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people have that sort of something, right? Something happened, whether it's with a job or your family experience or something where you know, you're just struck by, I don't want, I don't want this lifestyle of trading time for money where I have to punch a clock. Like it's not that, it's not necessarily that people don't want to work. They just don't want to work at the at the whim of someone else, basically, is kind of what it comes down to. So yeah, I like knowing kind of where people, what that moment was in life that sort of set them off on that path. When you were at the flip, so this guy just he showed up randomly. You didn't know him before that. He just kind of came by and wanted to see your finishes, and then he said he asked you, what you can bring to the table. And I think that that's actually a good topic to touch on because a lot of aspiring investors, you hear a lot about, partnering with people that are more experienced in all of this. And it's like, it's hard to know how to do that. And so that guy is asking you what value can you bring to the table, and you didn't know. And it's kind of like, do you have any advice on that? Like, if you could go back in time, as it turned out, you were lucky enough to be a part of that deal. But I think that's a thing that, and I've struggled with it. It's like, I see these people that are, far along in their real estate investing journey. And I'm like, oh, I'd really love to do deals with them. But then you reach this sort of roadblock in your mind of like, well, why would they do a deal with me? I'm sure I can help them, but I don't know how. Like, how do you advise people address that particular problem?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because now I end up on the other side of that conversation a lot.
Right.
And I tell that piece of the story intentionally because I think people need to be very clear about the value proposition that they have. What are you really good at? And that takes some inner work. For me, I had a ton of credentials, but I kind of balled them up and threw them in the trash when the banks told me that they were not reasons why they would be willing to give me a loan. I was a licensed engineer. At that point, I had my contractor's license. I had a project management professional certification. I had a graduate degree in business. Like I had all of these credentials and I was able to apply them against whatever the problems that came up in the project. So I didn't say that. And then the other thing is I had access to some cash. I had some liquidity. And I didn't say any of those things, but they were all something that ended up being valuable as we went on this journey to execute these deals. My counsel to people is if you want to be valuable to somebody who is an experienced investor, make the investment in the knowledge so that you can evaluate leads and identify a deal. Once you have that deal, you can go take that to an experienced investor, and one or two things will happen. They'll buy it from you, so you get a transaction fee, or they'll partner with you on the deal. The partnering is probably worth more long term, but it's going to probably pay you less money than if you sell it outright. And so, if you can have the knowledge, evaluate leads, and then bring the deal, your value jumps up tremendously. And that is, I think, the biggest difference maker. I think every investor is trying to overcome four things: knowledge, deal flow, experience, and capital. And what I found is the majority of experienced folks really don't enjoy the hunt of finding new deals. And so when new deals show up for them, they are really interested in taking advantage of them because they know it's difficult and hard work to find those.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice. I think uh, everybody in the space sort of knows that the deals are hard to find. That's a challenging aspect of it, and so I think a lot of people, as they get more experience, they'll hire an acquisitions person on their team, and so they're not even doing that anymore. They're just kind of overseeing. Yes, that's something we want to go after. So yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice as far as getting started. But I think also, just as you said, sort of knowing what your own value is, like realizing, because obviously you did have a lot to offer, but in that moment when he's asking you the question, you didn't know the answer. So I think it's a good take home as far as people, when they want to have these conversations with someone like you, knowing, hey, these are my strengths, this is what I'm good at. Like, oh, I'm really good at marketing, I'm really good at, I've got a network of high net worth individuals, whatever it is, something along those lines where you can bring in value, and figuring that out ahead of time before approaching the more experienced person, I think is a great idea. So that's perfect. Tell me a little bit about DreamCatchers.
Yeah. So, the real estate was working, it was happening. And I was like, man, it's lonely out here. I only get to talk to people when there's something going on with the deal because everybody else has a job. And I was like, man, the one thing that I probably regretted most on my career trajectory was leaving coaching behind. And so, as a consultant, I was flying back into Richmond on a Friday night in the fall, and I was on my way back from Salt Lake City. We get over the local high school, the lights are on. You can see the players on the field, you can see the stands are full. And then a guy breaks through the line and he's off running down the sideline, sprinting towards a touchdown. And I'm watching all this unfold as I'm on the airplane and realizing that I gave up the role where I felt like I had the most impact on people's lives to make extra $600 or $700 a month after taxes. And that was really disheartening because that amount of money didn't make a difference in my life one way or the other. But not having the impact did. After I got out of that role and I was local more frequently, what I realized was, man, I could go back to this, but it's going to be really difficult. And we were making a lot of new leaders. When you go from 2 people to 175 people, you need leaders within the organization to manage all of the staff. And the majority of people who got promoted into those roles had no leadership and development prior to being in those situations. So we developed a full leadership development program so that people could get the tools and tactics that they needed in order to be successful in the role so that we could maintain the top talent at the organization. Uh, When I left that role behind, I lost the opportunity to continue to do that. And it was probably one of my most favorite activities out of everything that I did in a given week. And so I was like, man, well, I wonder if I can start coaching people and helping them grow their businesses, helping them from a leadership development standpoint, and really kind of found my stride in that. And we've been working pretty aggressively to help people specifically in financial services. And that includes real estate investors, even though a lot of folks want to say that they're outside of the realm of financial services. If you're placing capital in investments, you're in financial services. And so we spend a bunch of time helping people scale their businesses and figure out, because scale is tied to the leader, right? We all have these lids, and the organization is never going to outgrow the leader. And so, how can I help you get to that next level? And, the framework for Dreamcatchers is really centered around this thing we call the red pill. It's a 6 level framework for that we call a model for a centered life. And so the 6 levels of the red pill are self-image, relationship, and work. Those 3 areas are where all your stress is created. And then there's health, prosperity, and significance. And so the first 5 levels, self image, relationship, work, health, and prosperity, we call that self actualization. That's when you're ascending up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then level 6 is where you get into transcendence. It's the significance play. It's where you become immortal because you positively impacted the lives of others. And we want people to fully we want to help people fully self actualize and then transcend and move to that next space so that they have a true legacy.
That's really cool. So it's a coaching program, not specifically coaching people how to purchase real estate. You're more coaching on personal development, sort of, and business growth within financial services. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, so I mean, within the framework, the real estate would fit in level 6, which is or level 5, which is prosperity. What I found, Jason, I started out that way. It's like, oh man, come in, come hither, and we'll teach you how to buy a multifamily deal using the Myers methods, our 4-step framework for finding funding, fixing and flipping a deal. And I was like, man, people are showing up and the 4 layers beneath are not together. And so when we add the pressure of a multi-million-dollar or multi-$100,000 investment, it's crushing the foundation because the foundation isn't solid. So I had to go do the work while we're in the middle of trying to find a deal to get them prepared to actually handle that new stress. Because for a lot of people, the biggest investment they ever make is in their home. So to go out and add that type of stress and worry into their world without them having a great foundation was just catastrophic. And so I took a step back and said, hey, I'm interested in the whole person. I don't just want to teach you this one hack. And everything that we try to do within our different organizations is comprehensive because I've just struggled, man. Coming out in entrepreneurship, what I learned was a lot of the consultants, a lot of the coaches, the gurus, they niche down. They've got a great marketing message. It cuts through all the clutter. But when you don't know what you don't know as a consumer, you buy an incomplete solution. And that may have been the last dollars that you had to allocate. And then you realize that another piece of the puzzle is missing. And they knew all along that that piece of the puzzle was missing and that you needed it, but they sold you their thing because they figured you would figure out what to do on the backside of buying that solution for them. And so we want to help people get what they need from the beginning and not feel like the last piece of their jigsaw puzzle is missing when they get done.
I love that. I mean, I think it's so many. so many of us come from a background of not of wealth, right? And so when you don't grow up knowing what, how to handle money and things like that, and then you want to make the switch into real estate where you're having, now suddenly you're adding zeros to anything you've ever thought about before. As you mentioned, most of us, our house is the biggest investment we've ever had, and a lot of people haven't owned a house. So it's kind of like, okay, now you're going to go from this, and I don't want to say thinking small, but it's just a totally different mindset to be talking about things that are, $1 million, 10 million, $50 million, and not having like a pit in your stomach when you when you think about the prospect of like taking on something like that, and what, and being the steward for other people's capital and all of that. I mean, I think for sure that's a great idea to have, work on people, their whole self, because otherwise, yeah, it is going to be overwhelming at times. It is going to be stressful at times, and it is going to be hard. So you have to kind of have the rest of you, your foundation, in a good place. I think it's a phenomenal concept, and not something that a lot of people are really coaching.
No, I think most people, especially if they're a coach, and I use that term very loosely because I think there's a ton of snake oil being sold, and I think there's a ton of people who don't get any results, but they've got great marketing. And it was one of the things I struggled with the most when I first got into the space, because I was spending so much time on the widget. I'm fixing the widget. I'm an engineer by training, right? I want to make sure the answer is right. And I didn't care about sales and marketing. And then I realized how many folks were going and getting the thing that was wrapped up with a pretty bow, and then being frustrated because they didn't get the outcome that they desired most. And so we've wanted to double down on that and just really make sure that when people came to us, they left in a much better condition than they were in. And I don't know of many folks who actually operate a portfolio and spend time helping them do all the mindset and marketing stuff that is necessary in order to be successful in the space.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. So tell me about your real estate portfolio now. Where are you at? Where are you headed? Kind of what's your plan?
Yeah, so we've got, a little under 100 doors in total spread across 5 properties. One property in Richmond, Virginia, and then the rest are here in Greensboro, North Carolina, in the middle of a decent sized development. We're early stages. We're doing about 120 units here. And, the goal is to be one of the largest housing providers in Greensboro. We really like this market. It's been growing. Well, the rent growth has been growing pretty aggressively. Population growth is really steady. And so we believe that's magic mixture for great solid performance of assets over the long
And you live there in Greensboro. What are you self-managing, or you have hired third party
term. Yeah.
management?
We
Third party
always do
management.
third party property management. At some
Yeah.
point we will probably vertically integrate, but for us, the point of doing the real estate is to have somebody else manage the day to day and actually be a business owner. If you think about Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrants, you got the employee, self-employed, the business owner, and the investor. I see a lot of folks running from the E quadrant, which is an employee, to the investor quadrant. I got to invest, I got to invest. But cash put into investments is going to earn a much lower return than it would if it was invested in a business. There's just fewer leverage to pull. So, what we encourage folks to do is figure out how you can become a business owner so that you can create equity. And from that created equity, I believe that you can take that and then push that into investments so that you get that bump in a much quicker pace or a shorter timeline.
Yeah, no, I think when Robert Kiyosaki was on the Bigger Pockets podcast, I think their 500th episode, he said something on there that really resonated with me, and it's kind of exactly along the lines of what you just said, is that he has businesses so he can put the money into investments, right? So it's like you you create these businesses, whatever they might be, and then you take that cash flow, that revenue generated, and then put it into that investment space. And then so you're essentially, your money's almost being recycled, and like your money's making you money at a much higher pace. And so I think what you said is exactly true. And it's like, I it's how I feel about my money that I make from my job. Like at this point, it's like I just want to take it and put it into investments, so that at some point in the near future, then it's that can sort of take over my income source with passive income. Um, so Jerome, let's switch gears a little bit, and I'd like to move to the section where I ask you the questions that I ask all the guests. And the first one is based on the name of the show being Know Your Why. What is your why? What drives you?
Freedom, 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 freedom. And let freedom ring. I think a lot of people are in bondage. I think they're trapped in the matrix, and they feel like they don't have a choice to do the things that they should be doing, the thing that's deep down in their heart. And it's just been beaten up, and so they repress it. And I'm on this mission to help other people understand that that doesn't have to be your existence. There are alternatives, and you don't have to submit to the American dream or other frameworks that may be out there that you've been programmed to believe are true that are not.
Yeah, it's I think, and I was one of those people that was sort of in the, as you say, in the matrix of this is what I'm supposed to do. I keep working. You work until you retire. Uh, my retirement plan for a lot of years was to not retire. Like, well, I just like working. I'll keep doing that. And then come along my kids, and I'm like, wait a second, this is I want time to be with them when I want to be with them. And so, you know, I think all of us that have gotten into real estate have at some point that epiphany. And I think you're right. Freedom, it's a it's a very it's to me it's a word that can be very vague but also very specific, right? So if you to stick with the analogy, if you're still in the matrix, then freedom is this thing that you can't maybe imagine, right? You're like, what do you mean by freedom? And you could even, maybe you can offer your definition of that. But once you get, sort of to the point where you realize, hey, wait a minute, it doesn't have to be that way, and I can achieve my freedom. I think it's a big, sort of epiphany moment. And so, how do you define freedom for maybe for yourself, or do you have a general definition that you would apply to anyone?
Yeah, I think freedom is being able to do what you want with who you want when you want.
Yeah, yeah, it is. It is really that simple. I mean, I think it's, people make it a bigger thing. Freedom doesn't have to mean that you're sitting on piles of money. Freedom doesn't have to mean that you have, this giant mansion. It just means it's about time, our most precious resource.
Yeah, and it comes down to the choice, right? Money is a tool. It buys you choices. If you have a problem that can be solved with money and you have money, you don't have a problem. There are certain
Yeah,
things that money can't fix for us, right? A loved one being sick, and they have access to all the doctors, but you just can't buy more life. I think that a lot of us mis misprioritize things. Money is not your most precious resource. Your time is. You can't replenish time. And you're always one day, 1 second, 1 minute closer to the end of your time on this planet. And there is no way to set that back or change that clock. It's a timer, it's not a stopwatch.
that's yes, That's perfect. That's a great analogy. It's a timer and not a stopwatch. I think you, you're 100% correct. I mean, it's just money's the tool. Money's the tool that can free you up, and you don't you don't have to have an infinite amount of it. You just have to sort of build your lifestyle in such a way that you've created freedom on both sides. So I think it's fantastic. Um, Second question, Jerome, is tell us something about yourself that maybe isn't common knowledge, special skill, a hobby, anything that you'd like to share.
Yeah, I think one of the things that is probably peculiar is I like to go spelunking, man. If I'm out of the country, I want to go into a cave and see what we can find. And it's always guided. It's not like I just run into random places by myself, but I really do enjoy going into the core of the earth and seeing what I can find. And usually I find something within myself when I go into those really dark spaces. When they turn out the lights and there is no natural light in a space, there is just the absence of everything, including sound. And when you find that, you really can get in tune with who you are and what you're doing. And if you're on a mission or not. I think a lot of us kind of drown that out with the noise of TV or the noise of the radio. And that silence is where you really can hear what's going on in your heart.
Yeah, that's great. I've never been, but it sounds with that description, it actually sounds very interesting. Maybe have to check it out sometime. I'll hit you up for some good places to go. But that's cool. I've never been, and you're definitely the first person who's ever answered that with spelunking. So uh, that's great. Um, Next question is how can people reach out to you if once they hear this conversation they want to connect? What's the best way? And we'll put everything in the show notes too.
For sure. I think the best place to go is jeromemyers.co. There we've got a ton of different free resources, and so folks can just jump on and grab some of these guides that we share with folks, because part of our mission is just to have an impact. Whether somebody we I guess the best way to say it is I want somebody's life to be better as a result of our encounter, whether we ever do a business transaction or not.
Awesome. Awesome. Final question. What piece of advice would you give to someone who is a little bit behind where you are in your journey? They're maybe getting started. What would you tell them to kind of inspire them and move forward?
Great question. Great question, Jason. Your dreams should be real. Your dreams should be real. And if nobody's told you that, you're now responsible for that, because deep down in your heart, you know that that's a true statement. You know that's true. And so forget all the people who told you to be practical. Forget all the people who have tried to beat you into submission to being mediocre, and go live the life of your wildest dreams. If you need support, there's plenty of folks out there that are ready to stand in the gap and help you make that transition from where you are to where you want to go. But just know, you have to know, you can't think. You have to know that your dreams should be real.
It's fantastic. I think many people, when you're a child, you you have a lot of dreams, right? You're like my son right now is like, he keeps telling me his name is Cowboy. He's 3 years old. He's like, my name is Cowboy. I'm like, okay, Cowboy. And I don't I never want to tell them, like, I never want to impede those dreams. I don't care whether I want them to have that, because I know later on in life people are going to, like, things are going to sort of suppress your dreams. And I really love that you said that, because I don't think I even thought about it before, but like, that's one of my biggest goals as a parent, is to not squish their dreams, right? I just don't want to. I think sometimes being a dreamer is looked upon as like a negative thing, and I don't think it is. I think you need to be a dreamer and an executor, or you need to be a dreamer who can partner up with an executor. But it just, yeah, your dreams should be real. I really, that's a great way to put it. And I love that. And that's a perfect ending for the podcast. I think your dreams should be real is fantastic. So, thank you, Jerome. That was awesome. I love that conversation. And I think, I really love your mission of helping people as a whole, and not just, sort of coaching them as, this is how you acquire a apartment complex, or whatever it is that which is what a lot of coaching is. And it's not that that's necessarily a bad thing, and those are things that people can use to use help in learning, but you also have to sort of work on your whole self. So it's perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your story.
Grateful for the opportunity.
Absolutely. All right, well, with that, we will sign off. Have a great day, everyone.
I'd like to show you why knowing your why is the start of your journey. Without a strong why, it can be so difficult to reach your maximum potential. My name is Dr. Jason Ballara, and every week I meet with real estate investors and mindset specialists that are taking action in order to build a life according to their own terms. We will break down what drives successful people and allows them to achieve at such a high level. If you are a professional wanting to break through, or simply someone that wants to hear an inspiring story, the Know Your Why podcast is made for you.